Hello, Greg Johnston, Painters Hill area, Flagler Beach. I have a question for the Army Corps of Engineers. I feel nobody's talking about the reason that we're in this situation right now. And I think that's important to address. I know the flow, as many people have said, of sand is from north to south in most instances. Although when Charlie came through, I live right on the beach. And I know I lost 2 feet of sand of my dune, of my 12-foot, 15-foot dune. I lost 2 feet of it on Charlie, and it was flowing north at that time. But I also lost 10 feet of dune, 15 feet high, when a northeaster came through. It wasn't even a hurricane, it was a northeaster. And I do know that the flow of sand or the dunes are eroded mostly when the water is going north or south. It's not when it's coming heavy in from the east, because I've personally observed it. It was just like a river flowing south, and it was just, the dune was just falling into it. So Mr. Holmberg's idea, the stabilization, does serve a purpose. It will build up, if his tubes are 2 feet high, it will build up that sand 2 feet high and slow down that sand underneath the water progression to the south, and eventually those areas should fill in. However, I think the problem we started with was that Matanzas Inlet was dredged, and similar to other people talking about inlets being dredged and for boat traffic, it robbed Flagler County of all that sand that we deserve to come from St. Johns County. So all that sand, if you go up there to Matanzas Fort and you see how the guns were positioned back 100 years ago, or more than that, 200 years ago, those guns aren't even positioned at the inlet anymore. That inlet is almost a mile or half a mile further south now, because the sand came down, filled in Matanzas Inlet, and then it was dredged and either put on Snake Island in the inlet, in the Spoil Islands, or it was put back up and onto St. John's beaches. That was our sand. That was sand that was naturally coming down to us. So all of a sudden, over the last 25 years, where St. John's got that beautiful dredge project about 25 years ago and filled in their beaches, naturally that erosion, that should help us, because eventually that'll work our way down. Well, we're not getting that sand because you started dredging Matanzas Inlet, and you took that sand and either put it on the Spoil Islands or you put it back up into St. John's. So we've been robbed for 25 years. Now, Matanzas Inlet has been, I believe, and this is a question I have, I believe Matanzas Inlet is not going to be touched anymore. It's going to be a natural inlet. Is that true?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, Matanzas Inlet is not maintained by the Army Corps of Engineers. The intercoastal waterway inside of the inlet is, but the Matanzas Inlet itself is not maintained. So when you're talking about it, shifting to the south, that's kind of the natural process it's taking. St. Augustine Inlet to the north of there is maintained and dredged regularly, but we don't dredge Matanzas Inlet. It's a natural inlet.
When they dredge St. Augustine, do they put the sand to the south, or do they put it back to the north? Because they should, every time they dredge, they should put it on the south, because that's the natural progression of sand.
Yeah, sand from the inlet is not placed on the north from St. Augustine. When we dredge the intercoastal waterway, it's put down on Summer Haven a lot of the time if it's beach compatible material to the south. And I believe that's kind of in accordance with the state's inlet management plan.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine. I just want to state that this last summer we've had beautiful beaches. I don't know if anybody else has noticed it, but we've had wider beaches than we usually do. Not Flagler Beach, but up in Painters Hill area, those beaches have been beautiful this year. And I believe that is because now we're starting to get that sand from Matanzas that is being left alone, and it's coming south and giving us a much wider beach. So I think with time our beach will get better and better if you don't disrupt the sand flow. Okay, so go ahead, Peyton, please.
Matanzas Inlet has been dredged many times. It's typically maintained by the Florida Inland Navigation District, and it's material from the inlet's been placed on the downdraft a few times. Now that material is a very fine-grained material, so it doesn't stay there very long. It typically moves either offshore or to the south. And remember, just to the south you have marine land. And at marine land you have a growing field. So in that growing field, it traps a lot of that material. So, and it's, like I said, it's a very fine-grained material, so I doubt if much of that material has actually reached the Flagler County beaches. It usually ends up going offshore. Now you mentioned St. Johns County, the St. Augustine Beach. That's a federal shore protection project. That was initially constructed in 2003 and has been nourished. It's scheduled to be nourished again coming up. But you know, a lot of that material moves south, and it's very evident if you go to St. Augustine Beach and you go south of the project area, the beach is extremely wide, and it's because all the material that's placed around Pope Road and you know where the pier is there in St. Johns County, all that material migrates to the south, and that's why Crescent Beach is so wide.
Yeah. Well, they actually dredged it 25 years ago, and they actually put sand on that.
Well, yeah, you mentioned St. Augustine Inlet. St. Augustine Inlet is, you know, it's a federal maintained inlet, and it's, you know, material's been dredged out of there. It's been placed on Anastasia State Park. The inlet used to actually be at Salt Run in the state park, and then they wanted a more direct route to St. Augustine, and so they created that inlet years ago. But and then you mentioned Ponce. Well, you mentioned Ponce.
Matanzas.
Matanzas
is the one that affects us most.
That's a very small, kind of a recreational channel. Like I said, it's maintained by Find, and the material is very fine, so it's really not a very good source of material, and it doesn't really have, I mean, certainly it's impacted the area to the south. That's why all those houses are threatened. That's why St. Johns County went through a moratorium to allow houses in that area because of the issues with erosion along that area.
Well, I can tell you, we'd like fine sand or, of course, sand. We take any sand we can get. So
I can appreciate that.
Sand is.
Yes, sir.
And another thing, the lady. All right, sorry.